The freezing pavement was the last thing I felt before I died, utterly ruined by the girl I called my sister. But when I opened my eyes, the calendar had rewound 2 years. My treacherous best friend was holding the investment brochure that would destroy her. This time I smiled. The overwhelming scent of roasted espresso and Declan's sickeningly heavy Le Labo cologne hit me like a physical blow. I gasped, my hands instinctively gripping the edge of the marble bistro table. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Just a moment ago, I was lying in the rain-slicked alley behind my apartment building. I had been fleeing the aggressive collection agents Harper had sixed on me after framing me for her own corporate embezzlement. I remembered the slip of my heel, the terrifying weightlessness of the fall down the concrete fire escape, the sharp, blinding crack of my skull against the pavement, and then nothing. Now, the jazz music of Café Leclerc was playing softly in the background. The afternoon Chicago sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm, golden glow over the table. Chloe? Earth to Chloe? Are you even listening? I blinked, the blurry shapes in front of me sharpening into focus. Sitting across from me was Harper Kensington. She looked flawless, her blonde hair perfectly blown out, the iconic Cartier love bracelet glinting on her wrist, a gift from her absurdly wealthy father, Arthur Kensington. Next to her sat Declan Reed, flashing a pair of blindingly white porcelain veneers and wearing a bespoke navy suit that screamed new money. I stared at the glossy, gold-embossed brochure resting on the table between us. Aetherion Capital, the future of algorithmic arbitrage. A cold, electric shock of realization washed over me. It was October 14th, 2 years ago, the exact day Declan had first pitched his fraudulent crypto investment fund to Harper, the exact day my previous life began its rapid descent into hell. In my past life, I had looked at that brochure, seen right through Declan's slick buzzwords, and voiced my concerns. I was a senior financial analyst at Vanguard. I knew a Ponzi scheme when I saw one. I had begged Harper not to touch it. I had even gone as far as hiring a private investigator, uncovering that Declan's real name was David Rostova, a 2-bit con artist with a string of bankrupted LLCs in Florida. When I presented Harper with the evidence, she didn't thank me. Instead, she threw her iced matcha latte in my face. She accused me of being a jealous, bitter spinster who was secretly in love with Declan and wanted to sabotage her happiness. But she didn't stop there. Harper used her father's influence to blacklist me in the financial district. She hacked my social media, leaked, doctored, incriminating emails to my boss, and isolated me from our entire friend group. By the time Declan inevitably drained her trust fund and vanished into the wind, I was already unemployed, destitute, and broken. When Harper needed a scapegoat for the money she had stolen from her father's company to feed Declan's scheme, she pointed the finger at me, and it cost me my life. Chloe? Harper's voice pitched higher, laced with that familiar, patronizing annoyance. I swear, you zone out every time I talk about something that doesn't involve your boring index funds. Declan chuckled, resting a proprietary hand on Harper's thigh. Leave her alone, Harp. Not everyone has your visionary mindset. Traditional finance people get scared when they see triple-digit returns. It threatens their whole worldview. I looked at Declan's smug face, then at Harper, whose eyes were filled with a toxic mixture of arrogance and greed. The phantom pain in the back of my skull throbbed. I took a slow, deep breath, tasting the sweet air of a second chance. You want to be a visionary, Harper? I thought. Let's see how far that vision takes you. I'm sorry, I said, letting a soft, admiring smile spread across my face. I leaned forward, my eyes wide and entirely devoid of the cynical skepticism I had shown in my past life. I wasn't zoning out, I was just doing the math in my head. Declan, this algorithm you're talking about, the decentralized liquidity protocol, it's genuinely brilliant. I've never seen a structural yield model like this. Declan blinked, clearly taken aback. He had spent the last 20 minutes mentally preparing to counter my professional objections. You think so? I know so, I said smoothly, picking up the brochure and pretending to study the absolute nonsense charts printed inside. To be honest, the analysts at my firm have been whispering about this kind of market inefficiency for months, but nobody had the tech to exploit it. You're light years ahead of Wall Street. Harper beamed, puffing her chest out. She looked at Declan like he was a god, then shot me a triumphant smirk. See? I told you she'd get it once you explained it. Chloe knows her stuff. It's incredible, I continued, setting the brochure down and looking Harper dead in the eyes. Harper, you always had this sixth sense for the next big thing. Remember when you told me to buy into that tech startup in college before it IPO'd, and I didn't listen? I've kicked myself ever since. If I weren't locked into my firm's restrictive employee trading policies, I'd be begging Declan to let me invest. Declan's predatory smile returned in full force. Well, Ethereum is an exclusive fund, Chloe. We're currently only accepting Tier 1 capital partners. Minimum buy-in is 500 grand. Harper scoffed, waving her manicured hand dismissively. 500 is nothing. Declan, I want to come in at the platinum tier. 2 million. I want to be a majority stakeholder before this goes public. My heart did a joyful little leap, though my expression remained perfectly composed. 2 million. In my past life, she had only started with 200,000. My encouragement had just multiplied her initial ruin by 10. 2 million is a strong start, babe, Declan murmured, kissing her cheek. But you know my board of directors, they want aggressive growth. Don't worry about the board, Harper said, her eyes flashing with blind ambition. I'll handle the capital. I'm not missing out on this. As they clinked their champagne flutes together, sealing their toxic pact, I raised my coffee cup to hide my smile. Drink up, Harper, I thought, the ice in my veins running colder than the Chicago wind outside. You're going to need something to wash down the ashes. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched with morbid fascination as Harper systematically dismantled her own life. She was obsessed. Ethereum Capital became her entire personality. Her Instagram, once a carefully curated grid of designer bags and brunch spots, morphed into insufferable girl boss crypto grindset posts. She posted pictures of herself on rented yachts in Miami with captions like, "Building an empire while you sleep." What she didn't post was how desperately she was hemorrhaging cash to keep up the facade. It was a rainy Tuesday night when my apartment buzzer rang. I opened the door to find Harper standing in the hallway, looking frantic, but trying desperately to hide it behind a strained, glossy smile. She pushed past me into my loft, shedding her soaking wet Burberry trench coat onto my pristine white sofa. "Chloe, we need to talk," she announced, pacing the hardwood floor. "Everything okay?" I asked, walking over to my kitchen island and pouring 2 glasses of Pinot Noir. I handed her one. Her hand was shaking slightly. "Everything is phenomenal," she lied smoothly, taking a massive gulp of the wine. "Ethereum is crushing it. We're up 40% this quarter alone. Declan is a genius, but we're moving into a new phase. Institutional integration. Declan says if I can inject another 3 million into the liquidity pool by Friday, I get a permanent seat on the advisory board." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "That's amazing, Harper. But 3 million? Didn't you already drain your trust fund for the initial 2? A flicker of irritation crossed her face. Harper hated being reminded of her limitations. "My trust fund was just seed money, Chloe. You have to spend money to make money. I've already liquidated my stock portfolio and sold the Hampton summer house Dad put in my name." I raised an eyebrow, genuinely impressed by the sheer speed of her self-destruction. "Wow. You sold the Hamptons house?" "It's debt equity," she scoffed, waving her hand. "Real estate appreciates at what, 4% a year? Ethereum is doing 10 times that in a month. But I'm still short, which brings me to why I'm here." She set her wine glass down and walked over to me, grabbing my hands in hers. Her grip was tight, desperate. "Chloe, you're my best friend. You're practically a sister to me. I want you to win with me." Here it comes, I thought, the pivot. "I know you have that 500,000 your grandmother left you in that boring Vanguard index," Harper continued, her eyes wide and pleading. "Pull it out. Give it to me. I will guarantee you a 20% return in 6 weeks. You can ride my coattails straight to the top." In my past life, this was the moment the screaming match had happened. This was the moment I told her Declan was a fraud and she was a fool, sealing my own grim fate. This time I looked down at our hands, let out a long, heavy sigh, and pulled away, my face the perfect picture of heartbreak and regret. "Harper, I can't." Her face hardened instantly. "What do you mean you can't? Chloe, I am offering you the opportunity of a lifetime. Are you seriously going to let your pathetic risk aversion keep you poor?" "It's not that," I cried, sounding legitimately distressed. I walked over to the window, turning my back to her so she couldn't see my eyes. "God, you have no idea how much I want to. I see what you and Declan are building, and it kills me that I can't be part of it, but I don't have the money." "Bullshit," she snapped. I know for a fact your grandmother left you $500,000. She did, I said, turning back around, forcing a tear to prick the corner of my eye. But it was placed in an irrevocable generational trust managed by a fiduciary. I don't get principal access until I'm 35. If I try to break the trust now, the penalties and taxes will eat 70% of it. I'd barely have $100,000 to give you. Harper stared at me, analyzing my face for a lie, but I had rehearsed this. The lie was legally airtight, boring enough to be believable, and completely, entirely unverifiable for her in the next 3 days. Are you kidding me? She groaned, throwing her hands up in the air. So you're useless? I'm so sorry, I whispered. If there was any other way, have you talked to your dad? Surely Arthur would front you the capital if he saw the returns. Harper let out a bitter, ugly laugh. My father is a dinosaur. I tried showing him Declan's pitch deck. He called it a fool's errand and told me to get a real job. He explicitly froze my access to the Kensington corporate accounts, so I couldn't make any more reckless decisions, she sneered, pacing again. He's going to look like such an idiot when I buy out his entire company next year. I watched her pace, calculating my next move. The trap was set, but she needed a little push to step fully into the jaws. Well, I started slowly, pretending to hesitate. If traditional banks and your dad are out, and you really need the $3 million by Friday to secure the board seat. Harper stopped pacing. She looked at me, her eyes burning with a feverish intensity. What? What are you thinking? It's risky, I warned, lowering my voice. And you didn't hear this from me. But at the firm, we occasionally deal with high net worth clients who need bridge loans. Fast liquidity, no questions asked. They use private equity lenders. Hard money. Hard money, Harper echoed. Like loan sharks? Like venture capitalists who operate outside traditional banking regulations, I corrected smoothly. They don't care about credit scores or income history. They only care about collateral. If you have assets like, say, your father's commercial real estate portfolio, they will lend against it. But I don't own those buildings, Harper pointed out. Though her wheels were visibly turning, my dad does. We're co-signatories on the Kensington Holdings LLC, but he has majority control. I took a slow sip of my wine. Exactly. So it's impossible. Because a private lender like Cameron Hayes would require a signature from the primary controller of the LLC to put a lien on the commercial properties. And Arthur would never sign. I let the name drop into the silence of the room. Cameron Hayes, a notorious, ruthless private equity shark operating out of the Gold Coast. He was entirely legitimate in the eyes of the law, but his contracts were ironclad death traps, designed to strip borrowers of their assets the second they defaulted. I knew about him because my firm had spent years unwinding the bankruptcies of his victims. Harper was quiet for a long time. She stared at her own reflection in the dark glass of my loft window. A signature, she murmured softly, almost to herself. They just need a signature. I felt a thrill of dark satisfaction ripple down my spine. I knew Harper's moral compass was non-existent. I knew she had spent her entire life forging her father's signature on report cards, speeding tickets, and minor credit applications. Harper, I said, injecting fake panic into my voice. Don't even think about it. Forging a document of that magnitude is wire fraud. It's federal. If Aetherian delays your payout by even a month, Cameron Hayes will seize your father's flagship properties. It's too dangerous. You don't understand Aetherian, Chloe, Harper snapped, her confidence surging back. She grabbed her wet trench coat, her eyes practically gleaming with madness. There are no delays. The algorithm guarantees weekly liquidity. I take the loan from Hayes, inject it into Aetherian on Friday, double it by the end of the month, pay Hayes back with his exorbitant interest, and pocket a cool $3 million profit. My dad will never even know a lien was placed on the building. Harper, please, I begged, walking her to the door. Just walk away. You have enough invested. I'm going to be a billionaire, Chloe, she whispered, turning back to look at me before she stepped out into the hallway. The sheer, unadulterated greed in her eyes was horrifying. And you're going to be sitting here in this sad little apartment, wishing you had found a way to break that trust. She slammed the door behind her. I stood in the quiet of my apartment for a long moment, listening to the rain beat against the glass. Then I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself another glass of Pinot Noir, and raised it to the empty room. To your billions, Harper, I whispered into the dark. November arrived in Chicago with a biting frost. matching the icy dread that was slowly beginning to creep into Harper's voice. For the first 3 weeks after our meeting in my apartment, she was on top of the world. She had done exactly what I knew she would do. Using a combination of stolen letterheads, fabricated notary stamps, and her lifetime of practice forging Arthur Kensington's signature, Harper secured a $3 million hard money loan from Cameron Hayes. She collateralized it against her father's crown jewel, a sprawling 30-story commercial high-rise on Michigan Avenue. The interest rate was a predatory 15%, compounding monthly. The repayment deadline was set for a blistering 45 days. Harper didn't care. She dumped every single cent into Aetherian Capital's institutional liquidity pool. Whenever we met for lunch, she would shove her phone in my face, aggressively displaying the Aetherian client dashboard. The screen always showed a rapidly climbing green graph. According to the completely fabricated pixels on her app, her $5 million total investment was now worth over $8 million. "I'm cashing out my initial capital plus the Hayes loan on Friday," she boasted during a dinner at Le Bernardin, swishing her martinis with careless arrogance. "I'll let the remaining $3 million ride the algorithm. Honestly, Chloe, I'm practically doing my dad a favor. When I buy out his board, I'll let him keep an honorary title so he doesn't feel entirely useless." I smiled, slicing into my steak. "That's so generous of you, Harper. How is Declan doing? I haven't seen him around lately." A microscopic twitch betrayed her confident facade. "Oh, he's incredibly busy. The board sent him to Geneva to secure a partnership with a Swiss banking consortium. He's been working around the clock. Time zones make it hard to talk, you know." I nodded sympathetically, masking the absolute glee bubbling in my chest. Geneva. Right. In my past life, Geneva was a rented Airbnb in Boca Raton where Declan, or rather David Rostova, was busy transferring Harper's crypto assets into untraceable offshore shell companies. The real unraveling began exactly 1 week before her loan repayment was due. I was at my desk at Vanguard when my personal cell phone lit up. It was Harper. She was calling back to back, a rapid-fire sequence of panic. I let it ring 3 times before finally answering, adopting a tone of mild distraction. "Hey, Harper, I'm in the middle of a quarterly review. What's up?" "The portal is down," she gasped. She was breathing heavily, the sound of traffic blaring in the background. She was pacing the streets. "Chloe, the Aetherian withdrawal portal is down. It says, error 404. Liquidity maintenance. I've been trying to initiate my wire transfer for 6 hours. "Breathe, Harper," I said, keeping my voice utterly calm to contrast her hysteria. "Tech platforms go through maintenance all the time. Have you called their support line?" The support number just rings and goes to a generic voicemail. Her voice cracked, pitching into a shrill, terrifying octave, and Declan isn't answering his phone. "It's going straight to international roaming. Chloe, the Hayes payment is due next Tuesday. If I don't have that $3 million, Hayes will invoke the default clause." "I'm sure it's just a glitch," I lied smoothly, pulling up a blank spreadsheet on my monitor and casually typing in fake numbers to look busy. "Declan is a professional. He wouldn't leave you hanging. Just give it 24 hours. But 24 hours turned into 48. Then 72. By Sunday, Harper looked like a ghost. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, entirely stripped of her designer glamour. She was wearing sweatpants. Her blonde extensions were tangled, and her eyes were rimmed with red, exhausted bags. "He's gone," she whispered, collapsing onto my white sofa and burying her face in her hands. "The Aetherian website domain has been wiped. It just redirects to a GoDaddy placeholder page. The office they rented downtown? Empty. The landlord said they broke their lease in the middle of the night." I sat beside her, gently placing a hand on her trembling shoulder. Inside, my soul was singing a triumphant, vindicated hymn. This was the exact terror I had felt in my past life when I was fired, blacklisted, and chased by debt collectors because of her lies. Now, she was drinking from the very cup she had poured for me. "Harper, oh my God," I gasped, playing the shocked best friend to perfection. "Are you saying he took the money? All of it?" $5 million, she sobbed, her whole body shaking. "My trust fund, the Hamptons house, and the $3 million from Cameron Hayes." She looked up at me, her face contorted in absolute, raw terror. "Chloe, Cameron Hayes is going to take my father's building. My dad is going to find out I forged his signature. He's going to kill me. He's going to literally kill me." We need to go to the police, I urged softly, handing her a tissue. I can't go to the police, she screamed, slapping the tissue away. If I go to the police, the FBI gets involved. Forging a signature on a $3 million commercial lien is wire fraud. I'll go to federal prison, Chloe. She grabbed my hands, her manicured nails digging painfully into my skin. You have to help me. You work in finance. You know how to move money. Hide me. Give me the $500,000 from your grandmother's trust. I can use it to hire a fixer, or flee, or... Harper, stop, I said, my voice hardening just enough to break through her delusion. I pulled my hands away. I told you, I don't have access to that money. And even if I did, it wouldn't cover a fraction of what you owe Cameron Hayes. You made a private bed with a loan shark. You have to lie in it. She stared at me, the betrayal warring with the panic in her eyes. But she had no time to argue. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text message. I watched the blood completely drain from her face as she read it. It's my dad, she whispered, her voice hollow. Cameron Hayes' lawyers just walked into his executive suite. They just served him the foreclosure notice. The explosion at Kensington Holdings was legendary. When Arthur Kensington saw his own forged signature on a hard money loan contract, he didn't protect his daughter. He was a ruthless businessman who valued his legacy over his blood. Instead of paying off Cameron Hayes, Arthur immediately filed a police report for identity theft and corporate fraud, effectively throwing Harper to the wolves to save his flagship building. The FBI raided Harper's penthouse that Tuesday. I watched it happen on the local news while sipping my morning espresso. Declan hadn't made it to Switzerland. Federal agents apprehended him at a private airstrip in Miami, attempting to board a charter flight. The Ethereum algorithm was exposed as a classic Ponzi scheme, built entirely on stolen graphics and empty promises. By Friday, Harper was out on bail, but she was a pariah. Her father had frozen her assets, completely disowned her, and publicly severed her from the family trust. Her glamorous friends abandoned her instantly. She had nowhere else to go, so she came to me. The buzzer to my apartment rang late in the evening. When I opened the door, Harper was standing in the freezing rain, holding a single duffel bag. The arrogant, untouchable girl who had ruined my previous life was gone, replaced by a shivering, broken shell facing up to 20 years in federal prison. Chloe, she choked out, tears mixing with the rain on her cheeks. My dad locked me out. My lawyer requires a $50,000 retainer that I don't have. Please, you're the only one left. Can I stay on your couch? I stood in the doorway, blocking her entry. I looked at her wet face, and the memory of my past life flashed before my eyes. The cold alleyway, the crushing debt, the sickening crack of my own skull against the concrete. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her with the same cold, indifferent stare she had given me right before I died. I told you Declan was a scammer, Harper, I said softly, the lie slipping effortlessly past my lips. Harper froze, her tear-filled eyes widening. What? No, you didn't. You told me his algorithm was brilliant. Did I? I tilted my head, feigning genuine confusion. That doesn't sound like me. I'm a risk-averse financial analyst. I would never endorse an unregulated crypto fund. And why on earth would I suggest you commit federal wire fraud to borrow money from a notorious loan shark like Cameron Hayes? That was entirely your own visionary mindset at work. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing. The realization slowly dawned in her eyes. She finally saw the trap, the breadcrumbs I had laid out, the ego strokes I had used to blind her, and the shovel I had handed her to dig her own grave. You knew, she breathed, taking a stumbling step back. You set me up. I didn't forge anything, Harper, I replied, my voice dropping to an icy whisper. You destroyed your own life because you thought you were smarter than everyone else. I'll tell the FBI you were in on it, she screamed, tears of absolute fury streaming down her face. I let out a soft, dismissive laugh. Tell them what, exactly? That your boring best friend magically forced you to commit millions of dollars of corporate fraud against your own father? I have no connection to Declan, and I certainly didn't sign Arthur's name. I stepped back into my warm apartment, placing my hand on the doorknob. Good luck with the arraignment, Harper, I said softly. I hear federal court is brutal this time of year. I shut the door in her face. I listened to her muffled sobs through the heavy wood until the slow, defeated shuffle of her footsteps retreated down the hallway. Walking over to the kitchen island, I poured myself a fresh glass of Pinot Noir and looked out at the glittering Chicago skyline. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I was finally safe. If you want to hear more stories about multi-million-dollar houses of cards coming down and the satisfying moment when a fake friend finally gets what they deserve, hit that like button and subscribe. Have you ever had a toxic friend who thought they were smarter than everyone else? Tell me your wild story in the comments below and share this video with someone who loves a perfect revenge story. See you in the next one.